All right, you guys, let's get to it. Let's rock the house. That's Haus. There used to be a really good sandwich place in Kenmore Square called Deli House. And of course, it was Haus, Deli House. And so we're going to go to my black and white friends, thinking about the great memories that I had of working at the Outer Limits. And of course, I'm not doing this at all. It's the giant team here. If you want to support the team, then head over to Rumble, drop a donation, do what you want on a Friday night, have a great time. And don't forget to head over to my Substack, become one of the genetically superior paid subscribers there, and you'll have a great time. You'll get extra stuff. And we're going to go now to the black and white era of my script writing days. Well, they were black and white before I joined in color. The Outer Limits and Fiction Friday.
There is nothing wrong with your television set. Do not attempt to adjust the picture. We are controlling transmission. If we wish to make it louder, we will bring up the volume. If we wish to make it softer, we will tune it to a whisper. We will control the horizontal. We will control the vertical. We can roll the image, make it flutter. We can change the focus to a soft blur, or sharpen it to crystal clarity. For the next hour, sit quietly and we will control all that you see and hear. We repeat, there is nothing wrong with your television set. You are about to participate in a great adventure. You are about to experience the awe and mystery which reaches from the inner mind to the outer limits.
All right. Yeah. Outer Limits. Great stuff. And don't forget their terminology for the Outer Limits. They always had to introduce the monster. That was called the bear. Had to have the bear in it. And that was Joe Stefano's term. And yet there always had to be that revelation of the monster in every episode. And evidently it really freaked people out when they were kids. I can see why. And there were some great episodes. If you haven't seen the new Outer Limits, just to let you know, having almost gone to school for astrophysics, I was going to go to Cornell. I went to BU for script writing instead. At the Outer Limits, I met another guy who actually studied engineering at Cornell, and they were very, very strict on the science for the Outer Limits, like, you know, the gravitational forces and all that stuff. Like you saw when I was reading Fuel. The information that I've got in there on the propulsion and all the vectors and all that stuff, that's all like scientifically right, you know? And I was fascinated by it. In fact, my buddy who went to work for the Goddard Space Flight Center, Alex, when he brought me into the clean room and I got to look at the hi-hat observatory that they were developing, went on top of a very, very high elevation weather balloons so they could get shots without putting a satellite up, get shots of space and stuff like that. It was just so interesting seeing the engineering challenges of something that is so high up that it's essentially almost out of the atmosphere. So it can't conduct the heat from inside it away through the air. And it's getting hit by the sun on one side, and that is very, very hot. But on the other side, it's very, very cold. And the internals of it are electronic, and that's generating heat. So that was the biggest challenge, he said, was how to handle the heat displacement. So that it wouldn't overheat, but also wouldn't freeze. Really interesting stuff. And Alex was a fascinating dude because he was going to go to WPI, Worcester Polytechnic, couldn't afford it, that sort of thing, or something had happened. And he went for like a year. Then he ended up working in a bike shop. But, you know, he had the engineer's mind, you know, just could do anything with mechanical stuff, and ended up getting a job with Goddard down in Greenbelt, Maryland. So that was very interesting to hang out with him. That was cool. Okay, so remember that if you do want to see some great episodes of The Outer Limits, watch both series. The old black and whites are phenomenal, and the new ones are also very, very good. The Sand Kings, that's one you probably will remember, written by George R.R. Martin. That's just a great, great story. It was Bo Bridges is in that, I think. And amazing, just amazing stories. Great, great things. So, and yes, I will someday will reveal the actress who was so difficult to work with. But anyway, maybe I won't. I don't think I'll say that. I do want to mention this also. I have plans on reading from this mighty beautiful piece that I picked up. Look at this. All of Conan Doyle's short stories outside the Holmes canon. Wow. Wow. Oh, man. So cool. I want to read lot 487? Oh, lot 249. And the unfortunate thing about that is I've never read that. And unfortunately, I read just a little bit too far down on something and I got a spoiler about it. I'm like, oh, man. Remember, if you ever read We by Zemiatin, if you ever read classic literature and there's an introduction by some scholar, skip it. Don't read it because they give you spoilers. It's so dumb. It's like, I know it's been a long time since the book was published, but new generations come up and they haven't read the book. So why don't you leave it alone? Put it in as an afterword. Like what? I don't know. It's so dumb. It's like I said, it's like putting the end of Psycho on the front of Psycho, on the front cover of Psycho. It's just so ridiculously stupid. Okay, now I want to turn to a short story here by Bram Stoker. And so let's put Bram up on the screen. Our guest for tonight, ladies and gentlemen, here he is, Bram Stoker. Yay! Yep. And like I said, he lived across, I think pretty much across or down the street from Sheridan Le Fanu, the writer of Camilla, which was one of the early vampire stories. And, he was, he got a master's in mathematics and, very involved with working for the civil service for a long time, like his father did, great accounting skills, was very interested in legal things and trying to put together the legal traditions of the various counties in Ireland, wrote a lot of books on those things. And also wrote a lot of short stories, wrote Dracula, took years before he did that and did a ton of research on it. And by the way, over on the side screen there, you'll see those are the Boris Afromov, AFREMOV, Boris Afromov art pieces. And they are wonderful, 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 very inexpensive, all painted by him. They have a new series that they're putting out from some of his students, which are also beautiful. I highly recommend. They're amazing. They're beautiful things. So I am now going to read A Dream of Red Hands by Abraham Bram Stoker. And let me see. I don't know when this was originally published. Let me see here. I'll have to see if I can look that up later, put it up on the screen later when I do the productions. 2025, because Bram, he was a time traveler, just like our time traveling newsreader guy on Liberty Conspiracy. This book, by the way, I'm reading this from Nightmare, 30 Terrifying Tales. This book, one of the great things about these turn of the century from 19th into the 20th century and then the pulp writers is that their writing style was wonderful. You look at a Robert Louis Stevenson or an Oscar Wilde, Bram Stoker, Conan Doyle, and Mary Shelley 100 years before, right? Even Lovecraft. Lovecraft is sometimes accused of using purple prose. I understand that. In some cases, he was paid by the word. You look at Poe, but Lovecraft, great example. If you actually do get a chance to read that, and you understand that sometimes it could be a little bit too verbose for the facilitation of the story, but if you actually look at the wording, sometimes it's amazing. It's wonderfully written. And when he was on his game, he was just, hitting home runs all over the place. That will remind me again to recommend The Worm Ouroboros by E.R. Edison, written in around 1920 or so in a Jacobean style. And again, take it in small pieces, savor the writing of one of the greatest writers in the English language, E.R. Edison. I mean, just so beautiful. Absolutely stupendous writing in The Worm Ouroboros. And that's why Tolkien and C.S. Lewis asked him to join the Inklings, because he was just so talented. He was amazing. Okay, this is a story called A Dream of Red Hands by Abraham Bram Stoker. The first opinion given to me regarding Jacob Settle was a simple descriptive statement. He's a down-in-the-mouth chap. But I found that it embodied the thoughts and ideas of all his fellow workmen. There was in the phrase a certain easy tolerance, an absence of positive feeling of any kind, rather than any complete opinion, which marked pretty accurately the man's place in public esteem. Still, there was some dissimilarity between this and his appearance, which unconsciously set me thinking. And by degrees, as I saw more of the place and the workmen, I came to have a special interest in him. He was, I found, forever doing kindness, not involving money expenses beyond his humble means, but in the manifold ways of forethought and forbearance and self-repression, which are the truer charities of life. Women and children trusted him implicitly, though, strangely enough, he rather shunned them, except when anyone was sick, and then he made his appearance to help if he could, timidly and awkwardly. He led a very solitary life, keeping house by himself in a tiny cottage, or rather hut, of one room, far on the edge of the moorland. His existence seemed so sad and solitary that I wished to cheer it up, and for the purpose took the occasion, when we had both been sitting up with a child, injured by me through accident, to offer to lend him books. He gladly accepted, and as we parted in the gray of the dawn, I felt that something of mutual confidence had been established between us. The books were always most carefully and punctually returned, and in time, Jacob Settle and I became quite friends. Once or twice, as I crossed the moorland on Sundays, I looked in on him, but on each occasion he was shy and ill at ease, so that I felt diffident about calling to see him. He would never, under any circumstances, come into my own lodgings. One Sunday afternoon, I was coming back from a long walk beyond the moor, and as I passed Settle's cottage, stopped at the door to say, "How do you do?" to him. As the door was shut, I thought that he was out, and merely knocked for form's sake, or through habit, not expecting to get any answer. To my surprise, I heard a feeble voice from within, though what was said I could not hear. I entered at once, and found Jacob lying half-dressed upon his bed. He was as pale as death, and the sweat was simply rolling off his face. His hands were unconsciously gripping the bedclothes as a drowning man holds on to whatever he may grasp. As I came in, he half rose, with a wild, hunted look in his eyes, which were wide open and staring, as though something of horror had come before him. But when he recognized me, he sank back on the couch with a smothered sob of relief and closed his eyes. I stood by him for a while, quite a minute or two, while he gasped. Then he opened his eyes and looked at me, but with such a despairing, woeful expression that, as I am a living man, I would have rather seen that frozen look of horror. I sat down beside him and asked after his health. For a while he would not answer me, except to say that he was not ill. But then, after scrutinizing me closely, he half arose on his elbow and said, "I thank you kindly, sir, but I am simply telling you the truth. I am not ill, as men call it, though God knows whether there be not worse sicknesses than doctors know of. I'll tell you, as you are so kind, but I trust that you won't even mention such a thing to a living soul, for it might work me more and greater woe. I am suffering from a bad dream." "A bad dream?" I said, hoping to cheer him. "But dreams pass away with the light, even with waking." And there I stopped. For before I spoke, I saw the answer in his desolate look around the little place. No, no. That's all well for people that live in comfort and with those they love around them. It is 1,000 times worse for those who live alone and have to do so. What cheer is there for me, waking here in the silence of the night, with the wide moor around me, full of voices and full of faces that make my waking a worse dream than my sleep? Ah, young sir, you have no past that can send its legions of people the darkness and the empty space, and I pray the good God that you may never have. As he spoke, there was such an almost irresistible gravity of conviction in his manner that I abandoned my remonstrance about his solitary life. I felt that I was in the presence of some secret influence that I could not fathom. To my relief, for I knew not what to say, he went on. 2 nights past, I have dreamed it. It was hard enough the first night, but I came through it. Last night, the expectation was in itself almost worse than the dream, until the dream came, and then it swept away every remembrance of lesser pain. I stayed awake till just before the dawn, and then it came again, and ever since I've been in such agony, as I'm sure the dying feel, and with it all the dread of tonight. Well, before he had got to the end of the sentence, my mind was made up. I felt that I could speak to him more cheerfully. Try and get to sleep early tonight. In fact, before the evening has passed away. The sleep will refresh you, and I promise you there will not be any bad dreams after tonight. He shook his head hopelessly, so I sat a little longer and then left him. When I got home, I made my arrangements for the night, for I had made up my mind to share Jacob Settle's lonely vigil in his cottage on the moor. I judged that if he got to sleep before sunset, he would wake well before midnight. And so, just as the bells of the city were striking 11, I stood opposite his door, armed with a bag, in which were my supper, an extra-large flask, a couple of candles, and a book. The moonlight was bright and flooded the whole moor, till it was almost as light as day. But ever and anon, black clouds drove across the sky and made a darkness which by comparison seemed almost tangible. I opened the door swiftly and entered without waking Jacob, who lay asleep with his white face upward. He was still and again bathed in sweat. I tried to imagine what visions were passing before those closed eyes, which could bring with them the misery and woe which were stamped on his face. But fancy failed me, and I waited for the awakening. It came, suddenly, and in a fashion which touched me to the quick, for the hollow groan that broke from the man's white lips as he half rose and sank back was manifestly the realization or completion of some train of thought which had gone before. If this be dreaming, said I to myself, then it must be based on some very terrible reality. What can have been that unhappy fact that he spoke of? While I thus spoke, he realized that I was with him. It struck me as strange that he had no period of that doubt as to whether dream or reality surrounded him, which commonly marks an expected environment of waking men. With a positive cry of joy, he seized my hand and held it in his two wet, trembling hands, as a frightened child clings on to someone whom it loves. I tried to soothe him. There. It is all right. I have come to stay with you tonight, and together we will try to fight this evil dream. He let go my hand suddenly and sank back on his bed and covered his eyes with his hands. Fight it? The evil dream? Ah, no, sir. No mortal power can fight that dream, for it comes from God and is burned in here. And he beat upon his forehead. Then he went on. It is the same dream over, ever the same, and yet it grows in its power to torture me every time it comes. What is the dream? I asked, thinking that the speaking of it might give him some relief. But he shrank away from me, and after a long pause said, No, I had better not tell you. It may not come again. There was manifestly something to conceal from me, something that lay behind the dream. So I answered, All right, I hope you have seen the last of it, but if it should come again, you will tell me, will you not? I ask not out of curiosity, but because I think it may relieve you to speak. He answered with what I thought was almost an undue amount of solemnity. If it comes again, I shall tell you. Well, then I tried to get his mind away from the subject to more mundane things. So I produced supper. I made him share it with me, including the contents of the flask. After a little, he braced up, and when I lit my cigar, having given him another, we smoked a full hour and talked of many things. Little by little, the comfort of his body stole over his mind, and I could see sleep laying her gentle hands on his eyelids. I felt it too, and told me that now he felt all right, and I might safely leave him. But I told him that, right or wrong, I was going to see in the daylight. So I lit my other candle and began to read as he fell asleep. By degrees, I got interested in my book, so interested that presently I was startled by its dropping out of my hands. I looked and saw that Jacob was still asleep, and I was rejoiced to see that there was on his face a look of unwonted happiness, while his lips seemed to move with unspoken words. Then I turned to my work again, and again woke, but this time to feel chilled to my very marrow by hearing the voice from the bed beside me. Not with those red hands! Never, never! On looking at him, I found that he was still asleep. He woke, however, in an instant, and did not seem surprised to see me. There was again that strange apathy to his surroundings. And then I said, Settle, tell me your dream. You may speak freely, for I shall hold your confidence sacred. While we both live, I shall never mention what you may choose to tell me. And he replied, I said I would, but I had better tell you first what goes before the dream, that you may understand. I was a schoolmaster when I was a very young man. It was only a parish school in a little village in the West Country. No need to mention any names. Better not. I was engaged to be married to a young girl whom I loved and almost reverenced. It was the old story. While we were waiting for the time when we could afford to set up house together, another man came along. He was nearly as young as I and handsome, and a gentleman, with all a gentleman's attractive ways for a woman of our class. He would go fishing, and she would meet him while I was at work in school. I reasoned with her and implored her to give him up. I offered to get married at once and go away and begin the world in a strange country. But she would not listen to anything I could say, and I could see that she was infatuated with him. Then I took it on myself to meet the man and ask him to deal well with the girl, for I thought he might mean honestly by her, so that there might be no talk or chance of talk on the part of others. I went where I should meet him, with none by, and of course we met. Now here Jacob Settle had to pause, for something seemed to rise in his throat, and he almost gasped for breath. And then he went on. Sir, as God is above us, there was no selfish thought in my heart that day. I loved my pretty Mabel too well to be content with a part of her love, and I had thought of my own unhappiness too often not to have come to realize that whatever might come to her, my hope was gone. He was insolent to me. You, sir, who are a gentleman, cannot know, perhaps, how galling can be the insolence of one man who is above you in station. But I bore with that. I implored him to deal well with the girl, for what might be only a pastime of an idle hour with him might be the breaking of her heart. For I never had thought of her truth, or what the worst of harm could come to her. It was only the unhappiness to her heart I feared. But when I asked him when he intended to marry her, his laughter galled me so that I lost my temper and told him I would not stand by and see her life made unhappy. Then he grew angry too, and his anger said such cruel things, and in his anger said such cruel things of her, that then and there I swore he should not live to do her harm. God knows how it came about, for in such moments of passion it is hard to remember the steps from a word to a blow, but I found myself standing over his dead body, with my hands crimson with the blood that welled from his torn throat. We were alone, and he was a stranger, with none of his kin to seek for him. And murder does not always out. Well, not all at once. His bones may be whitening still, for all I know, in the pool of the river where I left him. No one suspected his absence, or why it was, except my poor Mabel, and she dared not speak. But it was all in vain. For when I came back again after an absence of months, for I could not live in the place, I learned that her shame had come, and that she had died in it. Hitherto, I have been borne up by the thought that my ill deed had saved her future. But now, when I learned that I had been too late, and that my poor love was smirched with that man's sin, I fled away with the sense of my useless guilt upon me more heavily than I could bear. Ah, sir, you that have not done such a sin don't know what it is to carry it with you. You may think that custom makes it easy for you, but it is not so. It grows and grows with every hour till it becomes intolerable, and with it growing too the feeling that you must forever stand outside heaven. You don't know what that means, and I pray God that you never may. Ordinary men, to whom all things are possible, don't often, if ever, think of heaven. It is a name and nothing more, and they are content to wait and let things be. But to those who are doomed to be shut out forever, you cannot think what it means. You cannot guess or measure the terrible, endless longing to see the gates opened and to be able to join the white figures within. And this brings me to my dream. It seemed that the portal was before me, with great gates of massive steel, with bars of the thickness of a mast rising to the very clouds, so close that between them was just a glimpse of a crystal grotto, on whose shining walls were figured many white-clad forms with faces radiant with joy. When I stood before the gate, my heart and my soul were so full of rapture and longing that I forgot. And there stood at the gate 2 mighty angels with sweeping wings, and oh, so stern of countenance. They held each in one hand a flaming sword, and in the other the latchet, which moved to and fro at their lightest touch. Nearer were figures all draped in black, with heads covered so that only the eyes were seen, and they handed to each who came white garments, such as the angels wear. A low murmur came, a murmur that told that all should put on their own robes, and without soil, or the angels would not pass them in, but would smite them down with the flaming swords. I was eager to don my own garment, and hurriedly threw it over me, and stepped swiftly to the gate. But it moved not, and the angels, loosing the latchet, pointed to my dress. I looked down, and was aghast, for the whole robe was smeared with blood. My hands were red. They glittered with the blood that dripped from them, as on that day by the riverbank. And then the angels raised their flaming swords to smite me down, and the horror was complete. I awoke. Again and again and again, that awful dream comes to me. I never learn from the experience. I never remember, but at the beginning, the hope is ever there to make the end more appalling. And I know that the dream does not come out of the common darkness where the dreams abide, but that it is sent by God as punishment. Never, never shall I be able to pass the gate, for the soil on the angel garments must ever come from these bloody hands. I listened, as in a spell, as Jacob Settle spoke. There was something so far away in the tone of his voice, something so dreamy and mystic in the eyes that looked as if through me at some spirit beyond, something so lofty in his very diction and in such marked contrast to his work-worn clothes and his poor surroundings that I wondered if the whole thing were not a dream. We were both silent for a long time. I kept looking at the man before me in growing wonderment. Now that his confession had been made, his soul, which had been crushed to the very earth, seemed to leap back again to uprightness with some resilient force. I suppose I ought to have been horrified with his story, but strange to say, I was not. It certainly is not pleasant to be made the recipient of the confidence of a murderer, but this poor fellow seemed to have had not only so much provocation, but so much self-denying purpose in his deed of blood that I did not feel called upon to pass judgment upon him. My purpose was to comfort, so I spoke out with what calmness I could, for my heart was beating fast and heavily. "You need not despair, Jacob Settle. God is very good, and his mercy is great. Live on and work on, in the hope that someday you may feel that you have atoned for the past." And here I paused, for I could see that sleep, natural sleep this time, was creeping upon him. "Go to sleep," I said. "I shall watch with you here, and we shall have no more evil dreams tonight." He made an effort to pull himself together and answered, "I don't know how to thank you for your goodness to me this night, but I think you had best leave now. I'll try and sleep this out. I feel a weight off my mind since I have told you. If there's anything of the man left in me, I must try and fight it out alone." "I'll go tonight as you wish," I said, "but take my advice and do not live in such a solitary way. Go among men and women. Live among them. Share their joys and sorrows, and it will help you to forget. This solitude will make you melancholy mad." "I will," he answered, half unconsciously, for sleep was overmastering him. I turned to go, and he looked after me. When I had touched the latch, I dropped it, and coming back to the bed, held out my hand. He grasped it with both his as he rose to a sitting posture, and I said my good night, trying to cheer him. "Heart, man, heart. There is work in the world for you to do, Jacob Settle. You can wear those white robes yet and pass through that gate of steel." And then I left him. A week after, I found his cottage deserted, and on asking at the works, was told that he had gone north. No one exactly knew whither. And 2 years afterwards, I was staying for a few days with my friend Dr. Munro in Glasgow. He was a busy man and could not spare much time for going about with me, so I spent my days in excursions to the Trossachs and Loch Katrine and down the Clyde. On the second last evening of my stay, I came back somewhat later than I had arranged, but found that my host was late as well. The maid told me that he had been sent for to the hospital, a case of accident at the gasworks, and the dinner was postponed an hour. So, telling her I would stroll down to find her master and walk back with him, I went out. At the hospital, I found him washing his hands, preparatory to starting for home. And casually, I asked him what his case had been. "Oh, the usual thing. A rotten rope and men's lives of no account. 2 men were working in a gasometer. when the rope that held their scaffolding broke. It must have occurred just before the dinner hour, for no one noticed their absence till the men had returned. There was about 7 feet of water in the gasometer, so they had a hard fight for it, poor fellows. However, one of them was alive, just alive. But we have a hard job. We have had a hard job to pull him through. It seems that he owes his life to his mate, for I have never heard of greater heroism. They swam together while their strength lasted, but at the end, they were so done up that even the lights above they were so done up that even the lights above and the men slung with ropes coming down to help them could not keep them up. But one of them stood on the bottom and held up his comrade over his head, and those few breaths made all the difference between life and death. They were a shocking sight when they were taken out, for that water is like a purple dye with the gas and the tar. The man upstairs looked as if he had been washed in blood. Ugh! And the other? Oh, he's worse still. But he must have been a very noble fellow. That struggle under the water must have been fearful. One can see that by the way the blood has been drawn from his extremities. It makes the idea of the stigmata possible when one looks at him. Resolution like this could, you would think, do anything in the world to help someone. Aye, it might almost unbar the gates of heaven. Look here, old man. It is not a very pleasant sight, especially just before dinner. But you are a writer, and this is an odd case. Here is something you would not like to miss, for in all human probability, you will never see anything like it again. While he was speaking, he had brought me into the mortuary of the hospital. On the bier lay a body covered with a white sheet, which was wrapped close all around it. Looks like a chrysalis, don't it? I say, Jack. If there is anything in the old myth that a soul is typified by a butterfly, well, then the one that this chrysalis sent forth is a very noble specimen, and took all the sunlight on its wings. See here. He uncovered the face. Horrible indeed it looked, as though stained with blood. But I knew him at once. Jacob Settle. My friend pulled the winding sheet further down. The hands were crossed on the purple breast, as they had been reverently placed by some tender-hearted person. As I saw them, my heart throbbed with a great exultation, for the memory of his harrowing dream rushed across my mind. There was no stain now on those poor, brave hands, for they were blanched white as snow. And somehow, as I looked, I felt that the evil dream was all over. That noble soul had won a way through the gate at last. The white robe had now no stain from the hands that put it on. That's Bram Stoker, The Dream of Red Hands. Published in 1995. No, just kidding. Bram Stoker. Now, I will look up when The Dream of the Red Hands was published. I don't know if I can find it here amongst all the credits. It's going to be difficult to find it. So I'll get online here and look it up. But this has Dreams of the Witch House by Lovecraft. It's got Clark Ashton Smith stories in it. Let me see. Hubie Cave is in this. Robert E. Howard. Oh, the Black Stone. Nice. Henry S. Whitehead is in this. There you go. Very cool. Clark Ashton Smith, there is a stylist. Like I said, a lot of Clark Ashton Smith stuff, the plots are a little thin. You get a good one, it's really good. But with Clark Ashton Smith, it's more the style. So let's take a look and see one that was published, shall we? Dream of the Red Hands, Bram Stoker. I'll just look this up. Okay, I'm going to use pre-search. And here we go. I'm going to look up Stoker, Dream of the Red Hands, publishing date. All right, let's see. Want a date? Yeah, sure. Bad dates, Indy. Bad dates. Let's see when this was published. Over on the screen, there's pre-search coming up with it. All right. July 11th, 1894 issue of The Sketch, a journal of art and actuality. Later included in the anthology Dracula's Guest and Other Strange Stories. So 1894 from Bram Stoker. I hope that was a good reading. There was that little bit towards the end there as he was coming across talking to the doctor up in Scotland. But hopefully I did an okay job on that. And if I didn't do an okay job, I will re-record that last little bit and put it in as the separate entity. Now, the final thing that I'll give to you is where we stand on call. And I think you're going to dig this. Let me give this to you. So I'm going to read to you the whole story of Call. And then we'll get your opinions about Stoker, about Call. Let me know if you have any ideas on where Call is going to go. Call, formerly known as A Good Night's Sleep. It was 3 a.m., August 8th, when Tony Dembrato decided to kill the Driscoll's dog. After so many months, so many sleepless, steam-drenched, sheet-soaked nights fighting this mano a perro fight, it was the logical, inevitable decision. Because a man easily woken only has so many options. And as time passed and the damned cycle repeated, as the plaintive, toddler-like wail became heavy barking, a gnashing of teeth, a snarling, moaning menace, for a too long stretch of nights every month, the imbalance between sleep and angry interruption became impossible to ignore, and options fell away like leaves pared off a branch. Of course, the advice of his friend and now constant legal counsel, a Mr. Jack Daniels, had helped. So, still conveniently clad in his blackout socks, jeans, and grimy tee, Tony rose from the uneven mattress. He waited, retrieved his sea legs, and reached towards the floor, taking his sweaty bottle in sweaty hand and stumbling away from the cell of his bedroom. Slowly, wearily, round the litter of half-hungry cardboard boxes in the half-lit hall, he shuffled, even as the dog call rose from the southeast, as that corruptive canine voice directed itself solely at him. And with each step, he felt his chest warming, strength coming back. Drunk or sober, he knew that the spiteful and sneering Driscolls had chained the thing to the single, spindly, barren apple tree that still remained rooted in their unforgiving yard. They had trained that thing to face his small patch of woods rising northwest of their threadbare farm, to pull the chain taut and to project its animal speech through the dark, damp pines, around the shaggy vines, and over the low stone wall that once belonged to him. Surely they had trained it to persecute him as a form of revenge. Damned dandy. Let him discover what happens. If they had bees in their bonnets because he had to get out of a tight spot, well, then too bad. Not that selling the ancient wooded parcel had helped very much, but it had kept the bathroom nightlight on, and the bulb's wash of dim yellow, barely visible where it spilled onto the dusty mockery of what might pass for a hall floor, helped him navigate a blurry path towards the stairs. Was it yellow that was supposed to be the color of kings, for lords of the manor and sovereigns of their house, or was it some other color? If it was yellow, his last look in the mirror told him that he was in good matching hue, and the aging motif of the house also fit the milieu. Old chintzy gauze lidded the dark 19th century panes on either side of the uneven front door, drawn into stark relief from the outer Stygian depths by another tiny nightlight, long since disabused of its original purpose to welcome guests. And despite the illumination, he almost stumbled at the base of the stairs as his awkward liquor legs brought him close to Elaine's last suitcase and box. Wonder if she trained the mutt when they welcomed her on the first leg of her abandonment, her escape from what I damned gave her here. Who the hell knew where she was now? Dust had collected on those items as well. Dust like memories to be kicked up by errant winds to settle and hopefully be smothered, covered by new memories. If she had stayed, he could have shown her. If she'd stayed, he could have handled the business with greater care, pushed away the proclivity, purged the urge to pocket items when he set up the vermin traps and laid out the poison for his clients. He could have. Like the defeats, like the bad memories, unlike the addictions, he left the front door at his back and thumped away from the cramped foyer towards the bacon and beans stench of what passed for a kitchen. Bacon and beans and booze. The stale trio flowed to him like demons, hovered around him like a marsh fog, seeming ready to take on the blue-white cast of the moon that shone so starkly and accusingly on the pilfered baubles he'd placed atop that uneven table beneath the south-facing window. And as he approached, every inch of the way, the dog called to him like a disgruntled client, like the endless line of collectors, like his wife. "I'm coming, dear." Just like her, it wouldn't shut up. But he and Jack knew of a way. With the judgment against him and the order of restitution, he'd been forced to sell the land, sell the truck, resort to inferior cuts of meat, but in the semi-cool icebox awaited his special enticement, his paper-wrapped round cut, straight from the cow's hard behind. He tugged the line for the overhead bulb and squinted, setting the bottle on the counter and opening the off-white box. For a moment his lips tightened with the feral fuel of regret, and he stroked his grizzled chin. But the hound sounds hounded and sounded with even greater ferocity and helped him grab the package. It was heavy in his awkward hands, heavy in his chest and gut, casting a momentary pang of hunger that caught him like a fishhook. He wanted to spit for the loss that eliminating this menace would incur. After all, from the sound of it, the howling hellhound was mid-sized or larger, which meant using a lot of rat poison, which meant using a lot of meat to disperse the drug rather than hiding it in a smaller portion. A whole steak, a few days' worth of dinner, sacrificed in a dead-of-night ritual for the greater good. Since most of the top clientele had fled without so much as a "by your leave," there was plenty of poison, plenty of warfarin, that perfectly named silky white powder he'd used to cause thousands of rodents and likely predator birds that ate some to bleed out in agonizing, slow, tormenting fashion. The chemical he had used as the core of his livelihood. It was relatively inconspicuous. Elaine wouldn't have noticed if he'd wanted to put it in her food. But then there would be the nastiness of a possible investigation, the likelihood of a bunch of officer friendlies snooping round, and that might have gone tits up pretty fast. So, plenty. The work case was right over there. About 54 grains, maybe an eighth of an ounce ought to do. A nice little gift, slid into slits he would cut into each chunk once he diced up the round. The howler in the hollow would gulp it down with minimal chewing or investigation, especially if he was hungry. The meat's strong, raw smell and fatty taste would mask any subtle traces, and the dog would consume the entire dose quickly, without suspicion. Then, over the course of about 2 days, this new wonder killer from the Wisconsin Alumni Research Foundation, WARF, would make the pup's clotting factor disappear faster than Fatty Arbuckle from Hollywood. The dog would seem normal or only slightly off, maybe what the Driscolls would interpret as a mild lethargy or loss of appetite, which later would leave them feeling guilty for not making the trip up county to the vet, for not seeing the signs of trouble. Oh, they would pet him and talk to him like normal for a while, maybe coo to him if they saw he was down-eyed and sad. Hell, they'd probably let him in and out. And once the symptoms started to manifest, he would turn their place into a domestic charnel house, internal and external bleeding, crimson nose floods, seeping gums, bloody vomit and diarrhea, blood in the urine, unexplained bruising and swelling, coughing up blood, carpets ruined, blood sprayed all over the damn place, as if he were an interior decorator from hell. Then difficulty breathing and collapse. Maybe some final life-departing seizures, gray tongue hanging out before the curtain fell. Without prompt vet attention, the thing would die from severe blood loss, anemia, or organ failure. The process would be painful and drawn out, fitting for what he had done to Tony. His tormentor would not only die, he would die in agony, as the Driscolls helplessly watched. Their poisoned pet would die slowly, feeling pretty much every strange and torturous moment. Or so he hoped. A lingering, sober brain cell pressed the question of what might happen if the dog didn't eat it all. What if the animal left a chunk or two and George or his wifey found it and realized there wasn't a natural place under their ugly apple tree for fallen flesh of the steer? Well, those weak signals didn't stop him as he unwrapped his prize on one of the dirty pre-20th century porcelain plates that littered the counter. The thoughts didn't stop him as he pulled out his old Navy issue Bowie and cut out the bone. And the thoughts didn't stop him as he poured more than a few fingers into his stained coffee cup and watched Caramel Jack mix with the thick remnants of yesterday's cheap and bitter Instabrew. The only thing that gave him pause was the realization that if he'd taken more time to sit on the mental planning board, he might have grabbed and stored an old roadkill victim, something like a squirrel or possum. One of the advantages of living so far away from civilization was that there were lots of animals in the woods, and lots of those were too dumb, or Mother Nature didn't teach them the proper manners, to avoid playing in the road. Like good old Jesse. Well, like Jesse, some exploring mutts found carcasses of the roadkill, and many of them, like good old Jesse, would get sick eating half-rotted meat. If Tony had had his wits about him, he could have spatulaed a road pancake, let it decay a little bit, and now he'd be ready to leave it with the poisoned meat. He contritely downed the contents of his cup and let the burn work through his throat and into his limbs. "Forgive me, Father, for not being better prepared." eel-like tongue licking slick, syrupy lips, he held the knife again and made rapid, if slightly imprecise work of the cheapo meat, cutting it into chunks about 1.5 by 1.5. Then he drove the tip of the blade into each piece, trying not to hurry, even as the moon raced along its track, played peekaboo behind newly arriving clouds, and prepared to hide below the jagged western tree line to bid the feral party farewell just before morning. Satisfied with the cuts, he slipped on his thin rubber gloves, brought over the work case, and opened it for the first time in a week. The caustic smell of cleaners and borax slapped him some sense, stirred his sauced nerves, and helped him detect a good, cool breeze wafting through the slightly raised window over the dripping faucet and pit of his slime-coated sink. Second after second, drip after drip, howl after howl passed, but he remained preternaturally fixed on his goal. With the utmost care, he poured portions of the Warafin into each block, slightly pressing the meat together after each procedure, then placing the chunk on the left side of the paper. He had enough sense to keep the powder away from his nose and out of the way of the window, because he didn't have a bandana or mask to stop any aerosolized dust. Delicate or brutishly sloppy, he finished the process in less than 15 minutes and admired the pyramid of meat and death he'd created. Then he reached for the bottle, recognized his poison-covered gloves, and thought better of it. Time was of the essence. He had enough sense to know that a flashlight also was out of the question. Nowhere could he shine artificial illumination, not for a foot or an inch. The full-on light of the moon would have to do, and he had to hurry to get outside, into the multi-hued blue, before the eye in the sky slipped below the trees. He folded the stained paper, put it down on the treasure table beside all his stolen loot, sat in one of the two rickety chairs to the right, smiled, and slid on his cracked and moldering boots. Over the chirp and hiss of the woodland toads and bugs, that thing snarled in response, as if offering a challenge. And through the dark, damp pine trunks, his imagination wove, radiating forward, anticipating his route, previewing the stone wall, picturing the open area just beyond, the stark and twisted image of the aged apple tree and the farmhouse 100 feet or so beyond. Like a trained boxer responding to the bell, he let the images lift him to unsteady feet and felt, for what seemed like the first time, the damp, cooling breath of the night. Then he took up his weapon and was at the back door, pressing the iron latch, pulling open the pine portal, and stepping out into the darkly challenging, ghost-touched, shadow-striped bruise of the night. The old back deck betrayed his footfalls and creaked the few steps it took him to cross. Then it was into the dewy, mossy ground, onto the dewy, mossy ground, and a menagerie of sounds that seemed to blend with the strange personality of the brooding wood. So, that's what we have for Call. He's about to embark to kill the Driscoll's dog. So, what do you think? Any predictions about what you think is going to happen? Hey, Birdhouse, thanks. I love the pods. That's really nice. I appreciate that feedback. It's very kind of you. Birdhouse says, this is great. I don't know where it's going. I missed that. Cube, steak, cover-up, or conspiracy. And a pyramid, huh? Right on, man. A pyramid. Absolutely. And let me see. I am the one who wants half-rotted meat. This is the best. This is the best reading. Thanks, man. Carnivore clues, bust him. Let's see what else we've got up here. Steak symptoms. Right, Wally? Porn innocent birds. Angelo, thanks for being there. I'm out. Night, everyone. Probably listen to this story tomorrow. Listen to it tomorrow. This is amazing. He's reading the full story to us from Humble Peasants. Well, first, what did you think of that Bram Stoker story? That was pretty good. I hope I didn't screw that up at the end. I hope that was good campfire reading for a Friday night. I hope that was fun. But also, any predictions? Any ideas on where it's going to go? Um, I will tell you, just to let you know, I have another story about a guy who works on houses. And I got this idea because I was up a ladder day after day after day many years ago with my sister. We had these ice jams, and I was trying to break them off on the house. And I was at the ladder, and I realized that because I've done exterior painting on scaffolds and stuff like that. And what I realized being on that ladder and really using my upper body was that the falling off the ladder thing that tends to come, and I've actually spoken to people who do that sort of work up there and doing roofing and stuff like that. I said, I get a feeling that the reason you fall is because you get so comfortable being up there and you get so tired that you feel like you can lean back and lean against something, and you lean back and you go back. Now, like, that's exactly what happens. You feel like you're back down on the ground. You've been standing there so long, you feel like you can lean away, and you lean away and there's nothing there and you fall. And so I got this story idea about a guy who works on houses in the 19th century, and he goes around fixing houses. He's a fix-it guy. And I won't tell you anything, but I will tell you that it happens in the same town as this story. And that guy's house is this dude's house. That's all I'll say. So those are tied together. Okay. Thanks, Wally. Wally says, great read. Oh, yeah, we have it on the screen, of course. Thanks, Russians. Yeah, that was fun, wasn't it? That was really fun. I love reading stuff like that. And again, it is really strange. Like, I've been getting some texts from my my sister, and we're talking about trying to get together. And, little things being so sick like this pop up, and, you try to get around them, and you think, well, people know, even though you're not at 100%, you're still going, you're still doing what you can. And so she was talking about, like, hey, maybe I could stop by tomorrow and that sort of thing. And I've been invited to go to church. Andrew asked me if I want to go to church on Sunday and stuff like that with him. And I honestly don't know every day when I wake up what it's going to be like. And it's a very frustrating situation. You take what you can get, but sometimes it is frustrating because you just can't give your family everything that you want to give them. And you wonder whether they understand, and you don't want to have to explain it to them all the time because it sounds like complaining. But when you're used to operating at a really high level, and then you can't. So I'm hoping that we can get together tomorrow, and if not, maybe on Sunday. And I was talking to a friend about it possibly coming on as a guest. We were just texting each other last night, and we were going to chat on the phone last night. But this particular person said, oh, I'm like super beat. Why don't we wait till Sunday? So I was like, yeah, that sounds good. So, you go, I don't know. Anyway, the situation. Sometimes after I do the readings, I think last time I did one of the readings, it was an extra long reading. And I also mentioned I got kind of tired and stuff. But yeah, your mind is wicked, guard, Boston accent. Thanks, man. Yeah. And if I had the opportunity, even though I'm sick, I would make my career writing. But it's just one of those things right now, like not being at MRC TV, doing the show, trying to expand, and, trying to do something special with Liberty Conspiracy, hopefully making that, a Monday through Friday thing each year, maybe getting one other teaching thing if I can in my spare time, and then publishing the stories and nonfiction, I think is the way to do it. And there are a lot of good people out there, Tom Monteleone and Tracy Carboni and her husband, Robert, great people, F. Paul Wilson, number of really good people. You look at folks like John Della Rose. I don't agree with John on everything, but his channel on YouTube is doing great, really, really good. A lot of more libertarian, conservative-minded people. The folks at Author Update, again, more liberty-minded, small government kinds of people. And, you can have conversations with them. And I do think, interestingly enough, that some of the more left-wing, hard in their sleeves, sort of woke progressives who were so distanced from, you know, an anarchist like me are starting again to find commonality because of the Gaza thing, which is kind of cool. So again, you know, you can sort of open up those conversational routes again. But we'll try to do more. I've sent out some emails, you know, get some guests on for Liberty Conspiracy. And if you're just watching the former Star Trek writing fellow thing, you know, it is a really, really different world. I'll give you an example. So just to let you know, when I was at Star Trek, I was, you know, hardcore libertarian anarchist. And there was a day, and I'll just bring this up. I've mentioned this before in the show. I had dinner with Brandon Braga about 5, maybe 6 years ago. I went back to LA, and I had given a donation to the Writers Guild because I felt like I owed them something for helping me out there. So I gave like $1,500 to the Writers Guild a number of years ago. And part of what happened was I went out and had dinner with Brandon, saw Brandon over at his office for then, at that time, Terra Nova. Terry Metalis was his assistant, and Terry went on, of course, to produce 12 Monkeys, the TV series, went on to do one of the best of the series, I think, of Picard, was it? That's Terry Metalis, and Terry's a really nice guy too. And so I had dinner with Brandon, and when I saw Brandon at his office, first we got together at the office and hugged each other. I gave him a Paul Weller disc, and I was like, "Here, man, check out his 22 Dreams." He goes, "Hey, man, I've been checking out your stuff. You're doing a lot of hardcore libertarian stuff." I'm like, "Yeah, you're a libertarian too." He goes, "How'd you know that?" I was like, "Well, there was one day at Voyager when we were having a story meeting, and I had my Reason Magazine t-shirt on underneath a button-down, like pink button-down shirt. And we were in the story meeting, and I was up at the board, and all the writers were there, and one of the writers said, "Reason, what's that?" They saw that underneath the, he said, "What's that under your shirt?" And I said, "Oh, Reason." He goes, "Reason, what's that?" And I said, "I remember you answered. You said, 'Oh, it's Reason Magazine. It's a libertarian magazine.'" And I said, "Only people who read Reason Magazine knew what Reason Magazine was." He goes, "Yeah, you got me." So Brandon Braga, the creator of the Borg, is also a libertarian. Now, he's a little bit more of a like traditional Americana, small government, federalist, liberty-minded guy. Very pro Second Amendment, you know, rights and things like that. Hardcore in the Bill of Rights and stuff like that. But it's very interesting because in LA, that, like, you know, that was verboten. You did not speak of those sorts of things. And I know a couple other people who are very quiet on those. One of my friends is a producer, a longtime producer in nonfiction television on, I won't say the show, but it's one of the most popular like cooking shows of, you know, TV history. And in fact, he has a book that just got released, so his name will be revealed. I'm going to have him on as a guest, I hope. He's a great guy. And he's not afraid to get out there, but a lot of people are. And it's still kind of crazy. But, you know, Hollywood's been broken up a little bit, and, you know, now we're doing our thing. So, yeah, I'll get my stuff out in print. But it is going to require starting up something with like a kicker, like, you know, one of those Kickstarter type things. So that'll be important. Well, okay, I better go. I got to finish off that story, right? That'll be important, muy importante. And I'll leave you. I actually recorded a song today that I found on YouTube, but I will not be able to play it for you because I wasn't able to transfer it to get it over on the second computer. So I will leave you with just a little something. Something fun here. Let's go with, let's just go with the Outer Limits outro. I could go with a long song, but since this Outer Limits piece is going to be put out on, since this former Star Trek writing fellow piece is going to be put out on YouTube, I don't want to incur their copyright wrath. The wrath of copyright! So we're going to go with the Outer Limits outro. And it's interesting, this does flag it for copyright, but the outro is allowed. It says, YouTube says the owner allows its use. So that's cool. Here's the Outer Limits outro. Thank you. Please consider contributing.
Control of your television set to you until next week at this same time, when the control voice will take you to the Outer Limits.